Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head up to Norway once again, and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel a good few times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, quite a few different styles, but I think it is definitely fair to say that this brewery is still best known for their big Imperial Stouts and also for their New England Hazy IPAs, but they have been doing a few more things in recent times that I do need to check out. Now, the beer we're going to have a look at today is a style that I haven't had from these guys for quite some time, if memory serves me correctly. I've heard very good things about this particular beer, and it's also one of their latest releases through Systembolaget here in Sweden. So yeah, definitely curious to see what this is going to have in store for us. So hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to Oslo, the Norwegian capital in the south of the country, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Amundsen Bryggeri, or Amundsen Brewery as they tend to go by these days. They tend to use the English name more often. But this particular beer is called Emperor of Time. It comes in at 13% ABV, and they're describing this one as a bourbon barrel-aged Imperial Ultra Stout. So yeah, should be quite an interesting one this. From what I gather, this beer is a little bit more of a kind of old school Imperial Stout rather than being one of the kind of pastry sort of stout beers that these guys have been more known for in recent times. But yeah, let's see what this one is going to have for us. Very curious about this beer, as I mentioned. So yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Amundsen Bryggeri before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future as well. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated, and as always, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. You can search for beer for from your home country, state, county, prefecture, whatever, and of course you can find this beer in the Norwegian playlist. There's playlists of beers there from every country that has been reviewed on the channel so far. But yeah, let's crack on then and chat a little bit about Amundsen Bryggeri then. So Amundsen Bryggeri, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Oslo, the Norwegian capital, and the brewery is actually part of the Akerhus Group, which owns a number of bars and restaurants around Oslo. And the main men in this company are Ole Johan Tollefsen, Bore Jensen, and Tom Erik Andreasen. So the first brewery was actually part of a gastropub in Stortingsgatan, and this was just a very small operation, but the key man in getting this established was Tom Alfred Oimo, who had been a home brewer for a number of years. And from what I understand, he still runs the operation at the little brew pub, the Amundsen Spiseri, next to the kind of town hall in Oslo. So do go and check that out. I've been there once before. I need to go again and make an out and about video for sure. But over time, the brewery expanded, and by 2015, they were producing around 200,000 litres of beer per year, and they'd really become quite established within Norway, having opened up a second production brewery in the Nydalen area of the city. Fast forward to 2016, the parent company purchased the property Halketo Eindom, which is obviously a kind of real estate company, but with this, they acquired the Bjornarudeveien 14, the Bjornarudeveien 14, if we put it in English, property, and this was in the Halketo area in the south of Oslo. But this was turned into a 3,500 square metre brewery, and they began brewing there in late 2016, and the new brewery capacity apparently is about 1 million litres of beer per year. I'm not sure if they're using that full capacity at the moment, but that's what they have room for. But the brewery equipment came from Braukon in Germany, the canning and bottling lines came from Italy, and the total investment in this site was apparently 16 million Norwegian kroner. But the managing director of the brewery is Jeffrey Jansen van Vuren, and Matthew Thomas and John Hudson are the others involved in the daily running of the brewery, which runs a 42 hectolitre brew kit. So that's 4,200 litres per brew. But the artwork on the cans is apparently designed by the American Peter John de Villiers, and as you'll see, they are very, very distinctive. But in 2019, they produced around 9,500 hectolitres of beer, and as of October 2022, when I'm reviewing this beer for you, these guys have produced around 230 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. So yeah, that's everything I can really tell you about Amundsen Bryggeri for the moment. Their classic beer that you probably should try would be the Tropic Thunder Juice, which is a New England, I forget if it's a pale ale or an IPA, but that's a very, very solid beer. One of their first IPAs that they released, of course. That was a very, very nice one. These days they're doing a lot of different kind of fruity sours, and I do still need to try one of those sour beers actually. I need to have a look at a few breweries who have started doing these kind of more modern sour beers. But yeah, they were also known for their dessert in a can series that they did as well. But I haven't seen those in quite a wee while, come to think of it. So yeah, Amundsen were one of the big drivers of the kind of pastry stout style in Europe actually. A lot of people really enjoyed the dessert in a can series. But yeah, as I say, that's everything I can tell you about them for the moment. If you want to learn more, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on social media, and of course you can check out some of my older reviews or look at the Untappd page if you want to learn more about the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on and have a little look at this beer itself. There's actually not that much information to tell you about this one. There was a beer which I don't think is really, it's maybe in the same series. They're maybe going to do an Emperor series or something like that. But yeah, this one is called the Emperor of Time. There was a beer called Emperor of Sand before, which was 11%, if I remember correctly. So maybe they're just going to do different beers called Emperor, and that's going to be a series of high alcohol imperial stouts. But yeah, as you can see, the artwork on this one is pretty damn cool. You can see the sort of Grim Reaper Emperor of Time thing there with the owl just watching it. There you can see the Amundsen symbol, and of course the brewery is named after Roald Amundsen, who was quite a famous Norwegian explorer. He went to one of the poles, I forget which one it was, but yeah, you can see plain top on the can there with a little black ring pull, and yeah, very nicely presented. So this beer was released as part of the Tillfälligt assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden. Oh, I told you a lie, it's a raven, it's not an owl. I just thought it was an owl. I was looking at this eye on his chest, which made it look like an owl actually. But yeah, as I was saying, this beer was released as part of the Tillfälligt assortment toward the end of October 2022 through Systembolaget here in Sweden. And this cost me 80 Swedish kroner, so that's about €8. And that is, yeah, that's actually a very good price for what this beer is, a 13% bourbon barrel aged Imperial Stout. That is pretty damn impressive actually. But yeah, about €8 is maybe about £7 50 sterling, somewhere in the region of like $9, sorry, American, something like that. But yeah, pretty good this one. So this is meant to be more old school, of course. Let's get it out and into the glass and see what we have here. Very curious to try this one. I've been having a lot of Imperial Stouts recently actually, because there's been a lot of good ones kind of floating around. And of course we are starting to get into that season now. We're getting toward the winter, which is, big malty bastard beer time. So yeah, this should be good. So we've got maybe about 80% of the beer out into the glass now. Let's have a wee look at this. Yeah, so anyway, as you can see, this beer has poured pretty beautifully, I have to say. So before the head disappears, we can see that this beer is poured with about a 2/3 finger of a frothy, I would say kind of dark tan head. One or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass with this one, and just a few little ones going up toward the bottom of that head there. But the colour of this beer is a dark ebony rosewood colour for sure. Really, really dark, this one. As I said earlier, this one contains wheat, oats and lactose along with barley malt. So yeah, slightly more modern stout, this one, because of course the old school Russian Imperial stouts would most of the time only contain barley malt. But yeah, as I say, the colour of this beer, black as night, ebony rosewood. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on one, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put in will affect the colour of the beer too, but when it comes to black beers like Imperial Stouts, it's very difficult to use adjuncts or barrel aging to change the colour of the beer. But the fact, if we shine the light through this beer, you do get a little bit of a kind of Coca-Cola, Pepsi colour edge to this one. But yeah, because of the haze, the oats and the wheat in this beer, it does have that kind of more opaque type quality to it, but it certainly looks Very, very nice actually. And you can see the head on this one has just faded away to be a kind of thinner foamy layer, but there's a bit of a ring around the edge of the glass there. But I mean, overall, it does look pretty nice. There's nothing surprising about the appearance of this beer when you consider what style it is, you know, a big Imperial Stout. So yeah, I think we should have a little look at the aroma of this one. Nothing surprised about the appearance. So let's go for it. Aroma time. Oh yeah, that's kind of interesting actually. First impression of it, it's got a really kind of dry chocolatey aroma to it. And it's actually one of these beers where everything is very subtle. There's not really anything jumping out of the glass at you with this beer. So that's really interesting. But I will say, it smells pretty damn awesome. You can tell this beer is going to be pretty damn good. I do remember actually when Stigbergets in Gothenburg, they did a beer that was simply called, you know, bourbon barrel aged Imperial Stout, and it had a lion on the front. This one kind of reminds me of that because, you know, in a way, with Amundsen, with the Dessert in a Can series and so on, you're used to all these kind of mad, really sweet, big pastry stout type things. But this one is just more subtle and going back to the roots of the style almost. That's the impression that I get from this beer. But I will say it does smell very nice and properly old school. I think that's definitely fair to say. So, beautiful smelling beer. Gives you kind of everything you would expect from a bourbon barrel aged. I don't know if we can, when it's got lactose in it, I guess we maybe have to call this one an Imperial Milk Stout. So it's a bourbon barrel aged Imperial Milk Stout in a way, which is, I always used to enjoy that. I like the old school RISs and I like the Imperial Milks. Those are the two Imperial Stouts, and the Imperial Coffees, of course, as well, are always great, particularly the Brazilian ones. Love those. But yeah, let's just break this beer down. Let's break the aroma down and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth. So, in the middle of your nose with this one, you certainly have, you can smell the backbone of this beer. You've got that smooth American oak in there. There's a little bit of vanilla to the wood as well, but of course you've also got that sweet, you know, bourbon brown sugar coming out of this one, which is great. So yeah, that's absolutely the backbone of the beer. Lovely smooth American oak, wee bit of vanilla in there. Then you've got that layer of bourbon brown sugar. Yeah, that does go together very, very nicely actually. On top of all of that, you start to get the more kind of old school malty notes out of this beer. There is a little bit of a well-fired bread crust to this one, absolutely, but the sweetness of the beer really kind of suppresses the kind of dryness and the roastiness of that a little bit. So you absolutely have a nice little bit of a roasty toasty backbone to it. But on top of that, there's a little bit of sweet kind of almost like brown rye bread in there. You can smell the wheat just thickening out the whole that whole side of the beer. But it really has a very kind of creamy element to it, this stout as well. You can smell the kind of oats. You can smell sort of the oats and the lactose giving you this big sort of creamy Imperial Milk Stout type quality to this beer. This one doesn't have adjuncts added to it really, as I said. This is more just a straight up old school Imperial Stout. So within that, on top of that kind of oaty, lactosey creaminess, as I said before, there's a little bit of vanilla and there's a little bit of nutty character in this one. But as you go further back on the nose, you will notice that there's a wee bit of an almost kind of cocoa nibby kind of vibe to this one. You get the chocolate out of this beer. There's milk chocolate further forward on the nose, you know, like a sort of 40-ish% cocoa chocolate, but further back there is a sort of 60, you know, sort of 60 or maybe 70% cocoa chocolate. It's got a little bit of that more, it's got a little bit more dryness and yeah, it's got a wee bit more dryness and how would we say, just, you know, darkness to it, if you like. You start to get a little bit of that more kind of dark chocolatey type vibe out of the beer at that point. So yeah, aroma wise, this one is pretty interesting, I have to say that. But yeah, it's got a lovely, as I say, smoothness to it. The chocolate's really nice, and on top of that, you have got some straight up brown sugars. I mean, for me, this beer, it does have a wee touch of that treacly molasses sort of thing, but it's actually a kind of brighter, sweeter caramel. that sits in the middle of the nose for me with this one. And of course, you've got the bourbon brown sugars mixing in with the wood underneath it, so that's kind of promoting that. But you have this almost kind of glazed, slightly toasty caramel note to this beer, a sweet oily caramel, and you've also got that more oily, treacly molasses note to the beer as well. So aroma wise, this one I think is pretty damn nice, I have to say. So it gets a thumbs up from me. Yeah, the malty side of this beer really is very nice. I could sit and smell this all day. It just, completely different to what we've had from Amundsen for quite a wee bit of time, if I remember correctly. I really cannot tell. I couldn't tell you what the last Imperial Stout we had from these guys was, but it was another big beast actually, if I remember correctly. We seem to get these Amundsen Imperial Stouts just every so often. I can't remember if it would have been in, I maybe bought it in Copenhagen rather than in Systembolaget, right enough, but yeah. But aroma wise, this is very, very nice. Yeah, goes together really well in that sense. Other than that, I don't think there's too much to say about the malty side of the beer. With the thickness of it, I'm wondering, I'm very curious about this, whether the thickness is coming from the presence of the lactose or whether this will have been like a double mash Imperial Stout. I'd really be keen to know that. But yeah, it is pretty damn nice in that sense. So yeah, let's go on to the hoppy and the fruity side of this before we taste it. So yeah, hoppy side of this beer, there's not too much to report there. It is barrel aged. Imperial Stouts as well are not the most hop forward style of beer. Yeah, so there's not too much to report on the hoppy side of things. There's a wee touch of earthiness, a little bit of floral note, and also a wee kind of grassy character to the beer. So that's in my mind with this one. You do have a little bit of hoppy note going on with this one. But yeah, I like this beer for sure. So on top of that, as I say, a little bit of earthiness, a little bit of floral character in there as well, and just the remnants of some grassy notes. And the green component for me is quite, it's quite oily in this one, to be honest with you. So yeah, I think the only other thing we need to talk about in the aroma is the fruity side of the beer. So for me, the fruits are actually quite, it's kind of what you'd expect. There's a little bit of a kind of plummy note to it, bit of fig, and I'm getting some, I don't really get raisiny sharpness out of this one, so yeah, plums, a little bit of fig, and also kind of an oily black berry note coming out of this beer. Not tart, of course, so maybe you could say it's black currants, but yeah, these are the three kind of fruity notes that are coming out of this beer for sure. So yeah, I think with this one, it's really quite, it really is quite interesting how it goes together. It's proper old school, this, and it does, as I say, it reminds me of the Imperial Stout that Steve Berrios did with the lion on it. I think it was just called Bourbon Barrel Aged Imperial Stout, something like that. So yeah, I think this is going to be a monster. As I always say, take a little bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into this one. But we are going to have a taste of this now and see what it's all about. This is going to be my evening sipping beer for sure. So this one, Emperor of Time, Bourbon Barrel Aged Imperial Ultra Stout from Amundsen Bryggeri, Amundsen Brewery, whatever you want to call them, in Oslo in Norway. Let's get stuck into this one. Slanje, skål, cheers. Oh yeah. I'm going to say straight away, that is pretty damn awesome. This is one of these beers that it doesn't give you anything unexpected for the style. It's just really damn well done. First impression of it is, yeah, you get the bourbon barrel in this one. It's actually got a really nice dry, toasty, cocoa nibby type thing to it, but then on top of that, you've got all the sweetness. That's a beautiful beer. That could well be the best Amundsen one I've tried. I've tried some pretty solid beers from these guys. I mean, what was it called? No More Cowbell or something like that, which was the most dry hopped beer that Europe had ever seen at the time. Union IPA, that was pretty awesome. We have had some very good Imperial Stouts from Amundsen before, but this one for me, yeah, this is good. And even we've had some really nice Imperial Stouts on the channel from other places as well in recent times. But yeah, this is a bit special, this one. I have to say that just on the first sip. And it's interesting too, because we know Amundsen, if people ask you about Amundsen, you know, the Imperial Stouts, of course, the dessert in a can thing does come to mind. But it's really nice to see that they can do the old school things like this as well. So, you know, big thumbs up to them. Absolutely. So, yeah, the way that this goes together is really, really nice. Um, yeah, it's a bit more, I have to say, it's a bit more roasty and kind of toasty than I was expecting from the flavour, but it's, you know, it balances that out very well. So let's just break this down and describe the beer in the way that we always do. So the backbone of this beer, absolutely, it's got that nice kind of, it does have that nice kind of woody bourbon barrel backbone to it. You get that nice smooth American oak in there. As you move toward the front of that middle third of your palate, um, as you move toward that middle third of your palate at the front there, you will get a little bit of vanilla coming out of the oak as well, which you always get with American oak, I find. But that lovely oaky smoothness is there on the backbone. On top of that, you just get that layer. You do get that nice layer of bourbon, you know, bourbon whiskey sugars coming out of the beer. So yeah, I like it. Yeah, the way that this goes together is really, really very nice for sure. Um, yeah, it's awesome. It really is pretty good. So yeah, that's the backbone of the beer. On top of that, you get that bit of roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust there, and it's kind of interesting because it kind of goes down. The roastiness kind of goes down the middle line of your tongue, and then it mellows out as you go toward the edge of the palate for sure. Then on top of that, yeah, the roasty character on this one for me is quite unusual, just how intense it is down the middle line of your tongue. But as I say, as you move further out toward the sides of your palate, you start to get you do get just a little bit more mellow character to it, and some of the bourbon brown sugars, of course, push through that. So yeah, that's interesting too. But above that, you've got a bit of a layer of you've got a layer of kind of wholemeal white bread coming out of the beer. So yeah, a little bit of a wholemeal brown bready character to it as well. Um, and yeah, I think it goes together really, really nicely for sure. So on the that's good. So yeah, as I say, the roasty, well-fired bread crust, the wholemeal brown bread, and then on top of that, you start to get the kind of chocolatey layer out of the beer. So it's interesting with this beer as well because the lactose is kind of coming out in the chocolatey layer with this one. So you get quite a bit of milk chocolate. I mean, the front half of that middle third of your palate, you get a bit of vanilla out of it, but you get that big kind of, you know, 40-ish percent. You do get that kind of 40-ish percent milk chocolate type quality. And as you move toward the back of that middle third of your palate, you've got the higher percentage cocoa, you know, the sort of 70-80% cocoa chocolate. So yeah, this beer has a nice spectrum of that. You've got a bit of dark chocolate and a bit of more milky chocolate in there. And above all of that, you start to get the brown sugar from the malts in this one. I'm going to say too with this beer, I think I think it's double mash. I'm pretty certain it's double mash. But obviously the lactose is going to thicken up the mouthfeel as well. And at the same time, I don't think the wort boil in this beer is too long because you can just tell from the brown sugars. Whenever you do a long wort boil, you're going to get more leathery, caramelized character out of the brown sugars. And this beer does have a little bit of that, but not overly much. It's not mad in that sense. So yeah, the the backbone of this beer, absolutely, the brown sugar on top of the chocolatey layer that we've just talked about. You get the brown sugar, so you've got a layer of a more kind of leathery brown sugar, which is nice. Then above that, you start to get you've got this kind of circle right in the dead centre of your palate. So if you go into that dead centre of the palate, you've got a nice treacly molasses type note to this one. There's a sweeter caramelly quality underneath that, which is good. Then you start to get the more kind of leathery and slightly toasty brown sugary character too. So the middle third of your palate in this beer is where the majority of the flavour complexity is, and it's just beautiful how it goes together. As I say, very, very impressed with this one from Amundsen. We know these guys can do an awesome Imperial Stout, but it's nice to go back to something that's a bit more old school, like this. So yeah, really like this one actually. It's bourbon barrel aged Imperial milk stout. If we're going to, I think that's the style category this one fits into, and it's quite clear actually. In some beers it can be, kind of unclear, but here I think it's very, very clear with this one what style of beer it is for sure. So on the as we say, on the I think we've covered the middle third of the palate with this one, so let's go to the back third of the palate. The border region between middle third and back third of the palate with this beer, you can feel there's a little bit of bready build up there for sure, kind of brown bready note, almost a little bit like slightly cakey as well in fairness, but yeah, you can feel toward the back of the middle third of the palate in this beer, you could get that nice you do get that nice kind of dry oakiness again, and it just, again, more bitter and drier flavours come out further back on the palate, so you get more of a dry oakiness. You can feel the bourbon brown sugars again, but then the roasty, well-fired bread malt there is again drier. Above that, you've got a nice sort of like brown, kind of rye bready type layer on this one. That layer is taller, of course. Then above all of that, you get some of the nice kind of yeasty notes out of this one. And it is like a kind of slightly airy chocolate brownie, chocolate muffiny type flavour on the top of that back third of the palate. So you absolutely feel that the flavour on the back third of the palate is taller. Then as you come further forward, it just kind of squashes together that little bit more. And then, that's a good description of the malty and yeasty side of this beer. So, yeah. Yeah, this beer gets better and better the more that you drink of it. It's really enjoyable, this. Although, of course, at 13% and being, a 440ml can, this is one of the beers that's going to fuck your day in the best way. So, this thing is a monster, absolutely, but it's a beautiful beer. So, hoppy side of things then. Back corners of the palate, you do get a little bit of earthiness there for sure. As we mentioned earlier, this is a barrel aged beer, so a good bit of the hoppiness will have dropped out of this, and you could keep this longer and you'll get less of the hoppy character, so bear this in mind when you come to look at the date of this review and so on, but blah blah blah. But yeah, a little bit of earthiness there. As you move further forward, it's getting a little touch herbal, and as you push toward the front kind of corners of the palate, it's a little bit more floral, and there is a wee bit of aromaticity there, and round the front curve of the palate, definitely a wee bit lighter and grassy for sure. So yeah, way that this beer goes together is very, very nice in that sense. I like the little bit of hoppy character in this for sure. It just adds a bit more depth to the flavour, definitely. But let's look at the front third of your palate and the kind of fruity side of the beer. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again, you get a little bit of a bready build up in there. It's got a bit of a kind of sort of muffiny, a little bit of a chocolate muffin, chocolate brownie sort of thing, but quite dry. It's got quite a bit of a roasty character in there too, but the base of the front third of the palate, you get more of the kind of smooth bourbon brown sugars and the kind of woodiness in there, a wee bit more vanilla. Then on top of that, you're getting that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. So let's look at that. And when you take this beer in, you'll get a teeny little bit of raisiny sharpness, but on the back half of that front third of your palate, you get a nice juicy plum, but underneath that it really starts to give you the kind of drier, it gives you the slightly drier pruny flavour and also the kind of datey things. And then as you move forward, you start to get a bit of a figgy quality to the beer. And as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, you've absolutely got black currants in there and a wee bit of blackberry. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together in that sense is very, very nice. Yeah, I like this. I do like how this goes together for sure. So yeah, it's really, it's nice how that goes together actually, this one. The fruity side of this beer, when I first took it in, it was quite kind of red fruity, but the more that I drink of it, the woodiness and the bourbon sugars come out a bit more, so you have this more dry fruity character to the beer as well, which I certainly like. So yeah, and just a really, really nice beer, this one, absolutely. Would not hesitate to drink this again. But let's round off this review with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So, mouthfeel wise, this beer, full bodied, absolutely, no doubt in my mind about that. It's got this big, silky, and kind of oily mouthfeel at the same time as well. Very, very smooth carbonation. It's just, again, the lactose is going to help you with that. It's a big, oily, smooth, silky beer, this one. Massive thumbs up from me, this one. In terms of IBUs, it's a bit difficult to place this. I wouldn't be surprised if this was, maybe 70-ish IBUs, because you do get a bit of roastiness, you get a bit of dryness from the wood, you get a wee bit of roastiness from the kind of black malt in this beer, and you've also got that kind of hoppy bitterness as well. So yeah, I think about 70 IBUs with this one, everything combined. You've got a good sweetness to the malt base, obviously, and a smoothness too because of the lactose and all the different kind of malts and stuff that's in there. So as I say, stylistically, 100% an Imperial milk stout, this one for me. The fruity side of the beer is really nice too, big and oily. You've got the sweeter, more oily fruits, but you do have a wee bit of dry fruit there as well. And yeah, it's just really, really nice how this beer goes together actually. So it gets a massive, massive thumbs up from me. Yeah, I like how this one goes together for sure. Potentially the best beer I've had from Amundsen, and in terms of Imperial milk stouts, I don't get to review all that many of them these days. It seems to be more about the Imperial pastry stouts, which I'm not a massive fan of, and also the Imperial coffee stouts, but there have been more Russian Imperial stouts in recent times. But this was a lovely treat, this beer. Certainly worth the 80 kroners that I paid for it, so quite happy with that. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that. This one was the Emperor of Time, a bourbon barrel-aged Imperial milk stout, I would call it, from Amundsen Bryggeri in Oslo in Norway. This is definitely worth trying if you get the chance. So yeah, let's leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Amundsen as well, and we will definitely return to these guys at some point in the near future. If you're watching from Norway and you have some beer and brewery recommendations, let me know those in the comments section below. Until the next time, Slàinte, Skål, cheers, and see you guys very, very soon. Take care.